الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, we're here at the end of a long day. Started about talking about dignity and ended with talking about the soul. So I think we've covered a lot. I would like to offer a couple of thoughts here to share with you. I'm going to try to keep them brief because I know it's been a long day. The first thing I'd like to say, there's a verse in the Quran that says, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, that if you're amongst those who show gratitude, we will increase you. So I'd like to really thank the organizers for putting this on. I know that Munir has been working diligently for several months because he and I have been in conversation, and it's really his team that has put this all together today. I would like to thank all the speakers who came and gave us these insightful talks. Some of them were observing the Sabbath, and it was a little challenging at times for them, so I'd like us all to thank them as well. We want to thank our sponsor, DICID, Doha International Center for Interfaith Dialogue, that allowed and gave the financial support for all of this to come together. And I'd like to thank you for spending your Saturday. I know it's very nice outside with us in this auditorium. So if I can have a round of applause for all the thanks for everybody who's put this on together. So with that, I would like to offer a commentary, and I want to answer a question. The question is, what can religion offer us in end-of-life care? So our talks, this entire program, is arranged around this question, right? In the national conversation around end-of-life care, what can religion in general, and religious traditions or specific faith traditions offer us in this conversation? And from what we've heard today, I think the first answer to that would be that religion can tell us what death is for. I changed this from what death is to what death is for, and how to approach it. So in the Quran, speaking from the Islamic tradition, there's a verse in the Quran that relates الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, that God is the one that has created death and life, maut wal hayat, liyabluwakum ayyukum ahsanu amala, so that He might test you in who is amongst those who creates the best deeds, or whose deeds are the best. So the idea that death, right, in this verse is very interesting because it puts death before life, but death allows us to think about the finitude of our life and to think about every moment and how we are using that moment for the benefit of ourselves, of others, and ultimately for humanity all around us. It allows us to put that as our goal in forefront of our mind, that our time is limited and every moment and every breath that we have is precious, and that we should be doing the best of works while we are in this world. He heard this from our panelists, right, that Lydia talked about the Ars Moriendi being a teaching to die well, but it's dependent upon how you live, right? So you die as you live. If you live well, you die well. And that in the Christian tradition, death was the enemy. And partially that that the idea was that death has been, she mentioned, vanquished already. Right? There should be no fear. And this idea of not fearing the unknown of death is something that resonates. In our modern context, a lot of the conversation is because people fear what's the unknown, what comes after death. And what religions offer us is a font of wisdom to think about what death is and what life is for. And I think that without that, we would be lost thinking about death. So we also heard from Dr. Prager and Dr. Kinsbrunner about the idea of ghosts. If I'm saying that incorrectly, I apologize. But the command not to prolong, right, or not to the command to not stop to having a peaceful death or a fast death. Meaning, again, the idea of how we approach death is what religion tells us. So I would like to offer that when we have the conversation around death and dying, that without religion, or at least when religion is present, we can think about what death is for, but really what life is for, and then we can think about how to approach death. The second point from our conversation today, the second point is what religion can offer us, is that it can tell us who we are. Right? Religions tell us who we are. So there's a verse in the Quran that says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, إن أكرمكم عند الله يتقاكم, that the one that is most, and the verse here actually plays on the root word of dignity, right, kirama, that the one that is most أكرمكم إن الله يتقاكم, the one that is most honored or most dignified in front of your Lord is the one who is most God conscious, right? So we heard today in the panel about dignity and the different classifications of dignity that one of those classifications was attributive, right? That there was a relational aspect. And in our case, for religious traditions, it's related to God, right? That we derive, in one sense, our dignity from being either, as we heard about the Imago Dei, the idea of you're created in the image of God in some religious traditions, or that you are a creature of God, that He created you. That relationship allows us to think about who we are, right? Who we are. So religion tells us not only what life is for or what death is for and how to approach it, but who we are. And because of that, it lets us not have intellectual hubris about what we do in this world. A lot of the conversation around end-of-life care, I would say an underpinning is that we have an intellectual hubris that we can understand what suffering is, right? We can understand what's going on. And we take the God, as Rabbi Kinsburn said, we take God out of the equation. And I think that's a problem, right? Because we can't really understand who we are if we don't have an appreciation that our knowledge is limited. And what religion tells us is that our knowledge is limited. The verse I just recited also tells us, and that the verse right before it, or the part right before it, talks about that God has created you من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا, that God created you from male, female, into tribes and nations so that you might know one another. And today we've been engaging in a conversation across the Abrahamic faith so that we can know one another, we can understand one another, we can appreciate one another. And religion allows you to do this. I know that that's probably a paradox. You think about in all the news that religion is used to divide people, but here at least, today, we have seen that religion can bring people together. That different religious traditions can talk to one another, can understand one another, and therefore understand ourselves better, right? Through reflecting on what other people and other religious traditions think about life, death, afterlife, the soul even. So I think that we would have a positive conversation if religion was not at the table. So what else can religion offer us? Religion, in the conversations today also, allows us to be fully human and critique modern medicine. Right? So we heard about the idea we just talked a lot about the soul and the body. And the fact that we use the term the soul tells you that there's some meaning that's transmitted. It might not be exactly conceptually clear, but it's transmitted. Tell me in what medical textbook you talk about the soul. And what conversation about end-of-life care in a policy world we talk about the soul. But that means we don't talk about who we are, right? Are we a soul of the body, right? Or are we a body with a soul? These are deep questions. Are we just the brain and its functions? We're an accident. So without religion at the table, again, I think we do not recognize who we fully are, or at least have an appreciation that potentially there might be something beyond this realm. There might be something beyond the body, physicality, beyond reductive materialism there is to our life and our life experience. So, and that allows us to critique medicine. And how does it do so? And you heard this in the last panel. So if you think about medicine as tending to both the body and the soul, that sort of medicine is a bit different, right? That medicine has to be different, right? The Christian art of dying, as Lydia talked about, right? One of the components of that were prayers to utter when someone is dying. Again, what medical textbook tells you about this, right? But that's ministering to the soul. Right? That's ministering to the human experience of feeling that you no longer are going to have the capacity to be a part of this relational world. Medicine doesn't tell you how to do that, but we can critique medicine and say it should tell you how to do that, or at least there should be a space for that conversation. We heard about in Judaism, and I love that story. I've heard that story many times that Dr. Prager talked about. So what prayers not to utter, huh? So don't pray for your rabbi so that he can depart this world. Religion tells us that, right? It's ministering again to the soul, returning to the Creator. And we don't have that today in medicine. So I think that when we bring in end-of-life care conversations, religion into the conversation, it allows us to fully appreciate, right, who we are. We're fully human, right? And to critique what's going on in the healthcare system today. So those are my few reflections from the talks that we heard. I'd like to make a final comment talking about Bayan for a moment. And I speak from someone who observes Bayan, not part of the faculty. I think that from what you heard today, we've seen today, Bayan's vision of being an institution that wants to foster these sorts of conversations and dialogue, particularly since it resides on a campus that has a theological focus and an interreligious focus, is one that should be championed. There are many institutions around this nation that remain in silos, right? They don't cross the divide, religious or not religious, right? Some intellectual conversations occur at the intellectual level, but they don't get to the practitioner level, right? We remain in our ivory towers, and I think that Bayan and other institutions that want to cross those divides, those intellectual divides, those religious divides, should be championed and commended for trying to do that. I would like to say a bit about the idea of the leaders that Bayan wants to create and offer my own advice for those who are gathered here, in that we want to create leaders who are spiritually informed, intellectually skilled, right, and grounded in tradition. That today, a lot of the maladies are going to be answered by individuals who can speak different languages to different people, but remain grounded in their tradition and informed spiritually. They're not just intellectually august, but rather they have a spiritual aspect to them. They can relate to people, right? So when we talk about conversation, it's not conversation of the minds, but conversation of the hearts. And I hope that the individuals that you graduate from here can have that as part of their core being, that they are spiritually informed, intellectually skilled, and grounded in their tradition. And then that will make them relevant to society, right? So we don't start with the idea we have to be relevant to society and then we create backwards, but rather, if we are these individuals and we create these individuals and we create those individuals, then they will be relevant to society. That is not a question that needs to be answered. So I would like to thank, again, all the organizers, all of you for spending our time with us this afternoon. I hope you benefit in some ways. We started a conversation. It will not end here. Hopefully there'll be more programs for us to interact at. And again, thank you.